Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has said India is planning a Muslim genocide in occupied Kashmir. Talking to the media in Azad Kashmir, Qureshi said Islamabad has told the world about India's intentions and brutalities in Kashmir. The Foreign Minister added Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan will visit Muzaffarabad on August the 14th. Qureshi said the Indian government cannot hide the truth by blacking out the media and communication in the valley. He said Pakistan is celebrating the Muslim festival of Eid in solidarity with the people of occupied Kashmir.
I, as the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, have come here to express Pakistan's solidarity with you. Secondly, as Vice Chairman of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, I assure you that God willing, we will march together, march together, march together.
Representatives of all the political parties in Pakistan offered their Eid prayer in Azad Kashmir to express their solidarity with the occupied valley. Now moving on, in another act of state terrorism, Indian forces have not allowed any Eid al-Azha prayer congregations in occupied Kashmir. New Delhi's crushing curfew and communication blackout in the occupied valley has entered 8th day after India illegally annexed the state. The valley's biggest mosque, the Jama Masjid, has been closed. The Indian media says the occupying forces only allowed Eid prayers in a few small local mosques because New Delhi fears Kashmiri protests.
We wanted to go to Asare Sharif shrine, but the namaz did not take place there, and neither did it take place in Dastagir Sahib shrine nor in Sonwar. Nobody is listening to us. We have been cut off from the entire world.
The people of Kashmir held protests against India's annexation across the occupied valley after the Eid al-Azha prayers. Kashmiris abroad are unable to contact their families on Eid because of the communication blackout in the valley. Many fear for the lives of their loved ones amid reports of Indian occupation forces using live ammunition against protesters on Sunday. The Syrian Observatory War Monitor says 69 people have been killed during the past 24 hours south of Idlib. It says over 100 air raids were carried out by the government warplanes on Khan Sheikhun, Merat Humra and adjoining areas. This comes after Turkey said the US deployed more military and logistics equipment to rebels in Idlib. Meanwhile, Russia says it has shot down 6 drones launched by rebels targeting its Hamimim air base in Syria. The Russian Defense Ministry says nobody was injured and no damage was done to the air base. The 8th round of Doha peace talks between the US and Taliban has ended with both the sides remaining tight-lipped on the outcome. The negotiations are being held to end the 18-year-long war in Afghanistan. Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid says both the sides will consult their top leadership before taking the next step. Calling the talks long and fruitful, Mujahid says the work has been tedious and effective. Earlier, US Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad said Washington is working for a lasting and honorable Afghan peace agreement. The death toll from the seasonal monsoon in South Asia has jumped to over 1,000 as torrential rains and floods continue to wreak havoc. India has been hardest hit with over 750 killed in Kerala, Karnataka and Maharashtra states. Since the monsoon arrived last month, landslides, flooding and lightning has killed 113 in Nepal. In Pakistan, 53 people, including children, have lost their lives in rain-related incidents in Azad Kashmir, Sindh and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Meanwhile, 97 people have died in Bangladesh as heavy rain lashed across the country, causing floods and landslides. 44 people have been killed and 16 others missing after Typhoon Lekima hit eastern China's Xinjiang province. Authorities have issued a high-level warning throughout the eastern region. Thousands of flights have been cancelled after a natural dam collapsed north of Xinjiang province city of Wanzhou. Hundreds of trains have been cancelled and over 1 million people evacuated. Chinese state media says 3 million households have experienced a power blackout. Strong winds have destroyed 200 houses and over 66,000 hectares of farmland. Staying in China, in Hong Kong, the city's government has condemned violence that flared during Sunday night's protests. Demonstrators attacked public property and threw petrol bombs at police during Sunday's illegal protests, injuring a policeman. Police fired tear gas to disperse people demonstrating against a controversial extradition bill for the 10th consecutive weekend. The government says the police will enforce the law to bring illegal protesters to justice. Meanwhile, thousands of activists have occupied the arrivals hall at Hong Kong International Airport for a third day. Leader Carrie Lam says the rallies have started hurting the city's economy. Yemen's southern separatists who captured the country's official capital, Aden, have agreed to attend a meeting called by Saudi Arabia. The Saudi-led coalition fighting against Houthi rebels collapsed last week when infighting broke out in Aden. The Southern Transitional Council leader, Adrous al-Zubaydi, says he is committed to a ceasefire in the port city. The coalition launched an attack on the separatists after calling for negotiations and a ceasefire. Earlier, the coalition threatened to launch a full-blown military operation against rebels if they didn't quit the captured areas. Meanwhile, UN said clashes between the government forces and the rebels have killed 40 people and wounded over 200 since August the 8th. A rocket has hit the Libyan capital's sole functioning airport, breaking a temporary ceasefire between the Tripoli government and Khalifa Haftar's forces. Authorities say Mitiga Airport has been targeted by rocket fire on the first day of Eid al-Adha. Following the attack, air traffic was suspended until further notice as smoke billowed from the runway and parked planes. The government has blamed Haftar's forces for attacking the airport and a separate assault in Tripoli's Soug al-Juma district, which injured 3 civilians. Earlier, Haftar's Libyan National Army and the government agreed to a UN-sponsored humanitarian truce for Eid al-Adha. At least 7 people have been killed in a militant attack during an Eid prayer congregation in northeastern Nigeria. Local media says the victims included 2 soldiers who were guarding the event. The media reports several others were wounded, with some sustaining life-threatening injuries. Earlier, 2 Nigerian troops and 3 civilians were killed when ISIS fighters attacked a base camp at Maiduguri on Saturday. Air Marshal Abu Bakr has urged personnel and officers to redouble their efforts to deal decisively with the country's enemies. 5 children, including toddlers, have died after a fire erupted at a daycare center in Erie, Pennsylvania. Police say the victims' ages ranged from 8 months to 7 years. Authorities say the inferno ravaged the center, which also provides overnight services for parents working late hours. Neighbors a block away say they heard the screams of teenagers who escaped from a second-floor porch roof. Erie Fire Department Chief Guy Santon says the fire's cause is under investigation. Santon says early inspections show the presence of ashes and cigarette or cigar butts, which are banned in childcare units. Guatemala's former president chief Alejandro Giammattei has won the country's presidential election. The conservative leader led with 59% of the vote, while his center-left opponent Sandra Torres took 41%. Guatemala's electoral tribunal declared the Vamos party candidate Giammattei the election winner. Mr. Giammattei was running for the 4th time, while his opponent Torres was making her 3rd attempt. He says he will try to renegotiate the controversial migration deal his country signed with Washington last month. Guatemalan voters say insecurity and corruption were their main concerns. Russia has warned Google to stop interfering in its sovereign affairs. The Kremlin has sent a letter to Google demanding it stop using YouTube video hosting to promote unauthorized rallies. The Russian telecom and media watchdog Roskomnadzor says it will take action if Moscow rally videos are not removed from the internet. 60,000 protesters in Moscow staged the largest demonstrations since President Vladimir Putin's return to the Kremlin in 2011. The protesters defied a crackdown to demand free and fair elections for Moscow's city legislature. In Norway, police said the shooting at a mosque near Oslo is being treated as an attempted act of terrorism. One person was wounded when a white teenager opened fire at a mosque as Muslims were preparing for Eid prayers. Police Chief Arun Sujol says initial investigations showed the suspect appeared to hold far-right and anti-immigration views. Hours after the attack, the body of the young woman related to the suspect was found in a home in Bærum. Investigators are treating her death as suspicious and opened a murder probe. In Spain, wildfires have prompted the evacuation of over 1,000 residents from the Canary Islands. Firefighters dropped water from helicopters in an attempt to extinguish the blaze. 200 fighters are on the ground and 10 aircrafts have been deployed to fight the blaze. The government of Spain has been asked to incorporate a hydroplane help quell the fires. A 55-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of starting the blaze while doing metalwork. A humanitarian ship named Ocean Viking has rescued another 85 migrants from an overcrowded rubber dinghy in international waters. This is the second rescue mission by maritime humanitarian organization SOS Mediterranean within a few hours. Half of the rescued people were minors between the age of 13 and 15. They were traveling unaccompanied. 85 migrants were rescued off the Libyan coast in the first mission. The ship is now sailing in the central Mediterranean with a total of 170 migrants on board. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned with Indus. Lows and the highs of the business world now. Gains by Chinese equities and the yuan's stronger than expected rise has helped lift Asian markets. At the same time, uncertainty over the US-China trade conflict is contributing to market volatility. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan shook off early losses to edge up fractionally. Blue chip shares have risen almost 1%, boosted by China's announcement of relaxed margin financing rules. Japan's Nikkei, China's Shanghai and South Korea's Kospi rose by almost 0.5%. But firm gold prices underscore investor worries over risks from a prolonged Sino-US trade war. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell while S&P 500 lost over 0.5%. The Nasdaq Composite has dropped 1% because of the market volatility from the trade war. The Berlin Wall fell in 1991 but continues to affect people's lives today. Two childhood friends who were separated by the wall in 1961 have only just managed to find each other. More in this report.
This photograph is one of the most iconic images of the division created by the Iron Curtain. Today, the two teenage girls holding hands over the wall are 73 years old. Rosemarie Badaszewski, who lived in East Berlin, is still surprised that the guards allowed the picture to be taken.
What I did was, of course, not meant to be. I ran straight to the wall without looking right and without looking left. The policeman who is in the picture should have stopped me. I did not think about it at all. I did not even realize what I was doing. I walked towards my friend with only that thought in my head.
The other wall girl, Kriemhild Meyer, says she remembers how surreal it felt when she found out her city was being divided.
It was a Sunday morning and I was with my cousin in Marienfeld. We heard the news and heard that the Russians, they always call them the Russians, wanted to close the border. Every day, the papers were filled with news about how many crossed the border the day before. So it was an obvious step for them to close the border.
136 people died trying to cross the wall to get to the western side from the east during the Cold War. By the late 1980s, the wall included 45,000 concrete blocks, 259 dog runs, and 302 watchtowers. Today, only a few remnants of the 3.6-meter tall monstrosity remain.
Steel giant ArcelorMittal is striving to clean up and turn around Italy's most poisonous steel plant, while activists and residents urge its closure. Experts cited by prosecutors say 11,500 people have died from the toxic emissions over the last 7 years. On Italy's southern coast, rock climbers scale a giant canopy in Taranto to build the world's biggest iron ore park cover. Steel giant ArcelorMittal strives to clean up and turn around the country's most polluting plant. Beyond the factory lie the sea and sandy beaches, though only hardy souls dare to swim or eat mussels from there. The site in southern Italy's Zulia region, formerly owned by UA, is at the heart of a huge legal battle.
At the beginning of the year, there was condemnation by the European Court of Human Rights, which said that these decrees did not guarantee the health of citizens, and therefore the state should have taken note of this sentence and acted in a different way from where it did.
ArcelorMittal is spending 1.2 billion euros to curb pollution at the site by 2024. It was given a legal immunity to bring the plant up to environmental standards, but the Italian parliament revoked that in June.
This is the first important action being taken. It is to avoid, prohibit or prevent any dust flying due with conditions that we may have in the region. So this is a program that will be 80% complete in 2020.
Lié aux conditions, par exemple, de vent.
As Taranto suffers from record unemployment, some feel everything should be done to save the steel works. But ArcelorMittal has struggled to win hearts. While the company pledges to slash dioxin and dust emissions to below EU limits, they cannot be eliminated entirely. Families have been hit by abnormal levels of tumors and respiratory diseases.
There are two possible causes, pesticides or dioxins. We do not live near fields and are careful about hygiene of fruits and vegetables. Impossible. On the other hand, we live next to the factory that has been dumping dioxin day and night for years. 1 + 1 makes 2. No need to do some study to prove it.
Many residents accuse the government and the plant's previous owners of willful negligence. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For further updates, stay tuned to Indus News.